Every day, you walk into a building or log into a screen. You sit in rows. You raise your hand. You wait for permission to speak. It feels normal. It isn't. For more than a decade of your life, you follow bells. Bells that tell you when to think, when to stop thinking, when to move, when to eat. Who decided this? Why this structure? Why 12 years? Why these subjects? Who benefits from organizing childhood this way? What are we not seeing? We're told school prepares us for life, but look closely. Life rarely looks like school. Deadlines, yes. Authority, sometimes. But roles of silent compliance? Standardized answers? Permission to use the bathroom? It wasn't inevitable. It was engineered. And almost no one knows why.
Before school was standard, learning looked nothing like this. There were no grade levels, no home rooms, no report cards. Children learned by watching adults, by doing, by failing in public. A blacksmith's son stood beside the forge. A farmer's daughter followed the seasons. Knowledge was messy, local, uneven. In medieval Europe, if you were wealthy, you might study under a private tutor. If you weren't, you learned whatever your family knew, or nothing at all. In colonial America, schooling was sporadic. Short winters in one-room buildings, mixed ages, one teacher, sometimes barely literate. There was no universal system, no guarantee, no uniform curriculum. Education was flexible, but chaotic, powerful for some, non-existent for many. And then something changed, not gradually, suddenly. Factories. The Industrial Revolution didn't just transform work, it transformed time. Mills needed punctuality, railroads needed synchronization, cities swelled with laborers who had never lived under clocks. Factory owners had a problem. How do you take millions of rural, self-directed families and turn them into disciplined, reliable workers? You start early. In the early 1800s, a new idea began spreading: compulsory education. Not optional, mandatory. In Prussia, a model emerged: structured classrooms, age-based grades, state-designed curricula, bells, schedules, inspection. It looked efficient, predictable, controllable. Other nations noticed, including the United States. By the late 19th century, American reformers were visiting Prussian schools. They came back impressed, not just by literacy, but by order. And that's when the real shift began.
The first dominant version of modern schooling went all in. Attendance laws, standardized textbooks, centralized oversight. In 1852, Massachusetts passed the first compulsory education law in the U.S. By 1918, every state had followed. Children between certain ages had to attend school, or their parents faced penalties. Enrollment skyrocketed. In 1870, only about 2% of Americans graduated high school. By 1940, it was nearly 50%. On the surface, it looked like progress. And in many ways, it was. Literacy soared, child labor declined, opportunities expanded. But the system had a philosophy: uniformity, standardization, efficiency. 30 students, one teacher, one curriculum, tested by the same exam, processed in batches by age, like an assembly line. The belief was simple. To build a modern nation, you needed a trained population, not just thinkers, workers, citizens, soldiers. And when World War I arrived, schools became patriotic training grounds: pledges, flags, civics lessons, unity. The system wasn't neutral, it had a purpose. And over time, critics began to notice the cost. Creativity narrowed, curiosity flattened,
intelligence reduced to test scores, children labeled early, gifted, average, behind. And that's when resistance began.
In the early 20th century, voices pushed back. Progressive educators like John Dewey argued that children weren't empty containers, they were explorers. Learning, he said, should be experiential, democratic, alive. Alternative schools emerged: project-based learning, student choice, open classrooms. Then came the 1960s and 70s, counterculture, anti-establishment energy. People questioned everything, including school. Was it nurturing individuality or manufacturing conformity? Homeschooling movements began to grow. Private schools experimented. Public schools faced protests. Standardized testing came under fire. Yet the system held. Why? Because it solved a problem. It gave governments a scalable way to manage millions of children, safely, predictably. And then, in 1957, something happened that tightened the grip even further. A small satellite beeping in the sky. Sputnik. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik before the United States could. It was a shock, an existential one. If America was losing the space race, what else was it losing? Suddenly, education wasn't just about literacy, it was about national survival. In 1958, the U.S. passed the National Defense Education Act. Massive funding poured into math, science, foreign languages. Schools were reframed as strategic assets, not just social institutions. Curriculum hardened, standards rose, testing intensified. The message was clear: education was infrastructure, just like highways, just like power grids. Other nations followed similar paths. Global competition demanded measurable outcomes. Measurable meant standardized. Standardized meant uniform. Momentum built, and few questioned the deeper assumption that this structure was the only viable one.
Over time, it became invisible. 12 grades, 5 days a week, September to June, summer off. We stopped asking why. It felt natural. It wasn't. It was reinforced by policy, by funding formulas tied to attendance, by college admissions tied to GPAs, by employers requiring diplomas. This didn't ban alternatives, it just made them rare. Homeschooling remained legal. Alternative models survived. But the mainstream path became dominant. Familiarity became authority. If everyone does it, it must be right. Right? And yet, if you design a system long enough around one economic era, what happens when that era ends? Today, information is everywhere. You carry more knowledge in your pocket than entire libraries once held. Artificial intelligence can tutor you. Online platforms can teach you calculus, coding, languages, art. Work itself has changed. Remote, automated, creative, non-linear. Attention spans have fractured. Careers shift every few years. The industrial model of stability is dissolving. But the school structure? Mostly the same. Rows, subject separated into silos, time sliced into 50-minute blocks, standardized tests still defining worth. We tell children they are being prepared for the future, but much of the system was designed for the past. If we were designing this from scratch today, would we choose age-based batches? Would we prioritize memorization over adaptability? Would we measure intelligence with timed exams? Or would we build something else, something more fluid, more personalized, more aligned with how humans actually learn? Experiments are emerging. Micro-schools, project-based academies, self-directed learning pods, online high-grid models. Early data suggests higher engagement, greater autonomy, stronger intrinsic motivation. But scaling them? That's the hard part, because the current system isn't just educational, it's economic, it's political, it's cultural. Parents rely on it for childcare. Universities rely on it for filtering applicants. Employers rely on it for signaling competence. Changing it means disrupting far more than classrooms. It means redesigning society's rhythm, and that's uncomfortable. So why do we go to school? To learn? Yes, but also to standardize, to certify, to synchronize millions of lives into one predictable pipeline. It was a brilliant solution for a specific moment in history, but moments pass, the systems remain. The systems that shape your life were built for a different century. School is just one example. Work, healthcare, government. Many were engineered under pressures that no longer exist, yet we inherit them as default, as natural, as unquestionable. The question isn't whether school has value. It does. The question isn't whether it helped build modern society. It did. The real question is deeper. Why this version? Why this structure? Why this rhythm of bells and grades and transcripts? And if it was engineered once, could it be re-engineered again? The question isn't who created or why do we go to school. The real question is, why are we still obeying it?